Welcome back everyone, it's Charlie. This will be my full Marvel Zombies episodes 1 through 4 video for the entire series. There were so many Easter eggs and WTF moments, callbacks to the original comic book Marvel Zombies series, so we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. This definitely went harder than any Marvel TV series they've ever tried to do before. I wish they would try to do something like this in live action, but you can see all the rights issues that they have with Spider-Man. It's the reason why this wound up being a TV series instead of a movie like they wanted to. Isn't it just true that lawyers ruin everything? There were no special titles for each of the episodes. It was just part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. I think literally because it was just meant to be the movie they wanted to do, like the shorter movie chopped into 4 pieces, which is also why the episodes themselves were so short and there were so few of the episodes, because it was a movie script they chopped into 4 parts instead of a traditional TV series like What If, which would have been 8 episodes. I think this is also why they released all the episodes at once binge style, because it was so short. If it would have been a traditional series, they would have just done it weekly like they did with the What If series. It was meant to take place in the same universe as the Marvel What If Zombies episode. Episode 3 picks up directly after the end of that, where they show you what happened with Spider-Man, Ant-Man's head, and Black Panther taking the Mind Stone to Wakanda around the time that Thanos showed up with the Infinity Gauntlet during the MCU live-action version of Avengers Infinity War. Most of the present day of the episode takes place over a relatively quick amount of time, about 5 years after the initial zombie outbreak, during the Marvel Zombies What If episode. So it only took Scarlet Witch about 5 years to completely take all the Infinity Stone energy and trap everybody in her Hex type of illusion. Although it wasn't like the original Hex in WandaVision, there are a lot of ideas that they twist on their heads, and a lot of people also asking, why weren't the X-Men part of this? Why weren't the Fantastic Four part of this? A lot of those questions are answered in the fact that it took them so long to make this that they had to start making it long before they debuted those teams in live action, or they done any of the X-Men stuff bringing them back. It's kind of the same situation with the What If episode, Season 1, Season 2, Season 3. They would only let them do stuff that they'd already done in live action. So a couple years ago, when they started to actually make this and record all the voices, they had not yet decided to bring back the original X-Men actors, so like it wasn't even a thing. But it would have been a lot cooler if they did. Also the same reason why you didn't see Deadpool or Wolverine in this, even though they probably knew that they were going to be doing Deadpool and Wolverine when they started making this. One of the other quirks, too, that they talked about is the whole Blade Knight, Blade becoming the new avatar of Khonshu, the new version of Moon Knight, because at the time they started to make this, the Blade movie had not been delayed, so it was meant to be released much, much sooner than now. Like, we would have already seen Mahershala Ali come back during the Blade movie. There are even references in the episode where he explains how he became Khonshu's next avatar, because his friend Mark Spector died during the initial zombie outbreak, implying that Moon Knight was supposed to show up during one of the versions of the live-action Blade movie. That was also probably part of their early live-action Midnight Suns plans, that they were forming a team together, like a supernatural Avengers type of team, separate from the Avengers movies. I think that Marvel is still planning on doing Midnight Suns, but it's just been pushed till after Secret Wars now. Most of the stuff that does not involve wrapping up the multiverse arc has been pushed till after Secret Wars, which also includes a potential live-action Blade movie. Mahershala Ali is still talking like they might make it at some point.
Friend of a friend. His avatar was lost in the plague. Now the deity acts through me.
Probably one of the first changes that you notice at the beginning of all the episodes, there's no actual music over the Marvel Animation intro logo, but they do a custom zombified version of that Marvel Animation logo, and then do jump scare horror music over the Marvel Zombies logo in voices of Scarlet Witch's Army of the Undead yelling underneath the music. Going through all of the episodes, episode 1 was mostly their Young Avengers episode. You can definitely tell that Marvel at one point planned on doing Young Avengers stuff much, much sooner, because it's kind of the vibe here when they open up the episode, and most of the characters are meant to be on that Young Avengers or Champions team. I think they're calling it Champions now in live action, and it's going to be a TV show on Disney Plus after Secret Wars. We will see if any of them have any cameos during Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars. I haven't really heard too much about them specifically, these Young Avengers characters. You also notice they have Iron Man's Mark 50 armor with Friday, his AI, who's remotely piloting it with a bear sticking out of its head, because Iron Man died during the initial Marvel Zombies outbreak in the What If episode, and this is meant to coincide with the events of Avengers Infinity War, so he had made his Mark 50 armor by that point. There are a couple familiar MCU locations, like this is Grand Central Terminal right in front of the Avengers Tower, but they don't actually show you the full Avengers Tower because remember, they had already moved to their base in upstate New York when this is all going on. You notice some of the MCU live-action actors came back to voice their characters, but not everybody. You can kind of tell when it's somebody different. For instance, Mahershala Ali did not come back to do the voice of Moon Knight Blade or Blade Knight. Just somebody who sounds very much like him. Then they find the Nova Corps transmitter inside the random S.H.I.E.L.D. agent's Quinjet, setting up the whole storyline where they try to contact the Nova Corps, which does wind up being a dead end to make as many zombie puns as possible. Basically, the whole series is meant to end on a downer note, the way they did in the original Marvel Zombies comic book issue. It's a bit of a downer ending. But the actual ending in the comics is vastly, vastly different because it involves all of Marvel characters line wide, not just some of the live-action characters that they have access to when they were making it. They reveal Hawkeye is monitoring the area, trying to kill pretty much anybody who's living around, not just them. There are a lot of references to the quantum realm, quantum isotopes, because Ant-Man, Hank Pym, Janet Van Dyne, remember she was responsible for the initial zombie outbreak. She and Hank Pym came out of the quantum realm with the zombie virus and started biting people, the original Avengers, and that was the original outbreak in the San Francisco area, which we see from Shang-Chi's side of things during one of the later episodes. The Nova Corps knew about the zombie outbreak the whole time and quarantined the planet these last 5 years, basically destroying anybody that tried to leave the planet. There are a lot of questions about that, especially with the way they use the Infinity Stone energy at the end of the series. We'll talk about that when we get to that part of the episodes. Some of the characters' actions and the things that they do with the Infinity Stones, I think, are for pure plot reasons. One of the other things, too, that becomes very apparent in this episode is that Miss Marvel is like one of the main characters of this, along with Scarlet Witch. Like, it's basically a Scarlet Witch movie that Miss Marvel is one of the main characters of. But it's never really clear why Scarlet Witch needs Miss Marvel so badly. They try to make it seem it has something to do with her bangle, but they're not really clear about that. And they try to make her bangle do a lot of things that you've never actually seen them do inside the live-action movies or the TV series. So there's a lot of hand-waving going on in the last couple of episodes, and it moves so quickly because it's so short, so there's not really time to explain things. She references Uhura from Star Trek. I'm guessing Miss Marvel is just a huge Star Trek fan inside the MCU. I don't think we've ever actually seen a lot of Star Trek references inside the MCU in general, so this seems like a first.
Oh yeah, maiden voyage of the USS Uhura, baby!
Not totally sure why they called their SUV the USS Uhura and not just calling it the USS Enterprise. It feels like if you were a big Star Trek fan the way Miss Marvel is, you would call your car the Enterprise, not the Uhura. Maybe they did that so Paramount wouldn't sue Disney for using all the Star Trek references. Typically, people don't get sued for stuff like that, though. They run into a storm, or what they think is a storm, but it's actually zombie Captain Marvel who's in the middle of a fight with Icarus in the sky, and they explain that it's been going on continuously 24/7 for the last 5 years because Captain Marvel is a zombie, she doesn't need to rest, and Icarus is a celestial robot, he also does not need to rest. So the idea is that they've just been fighting continuously for the last 5 years, catching anybody else in collateral damage who just happens across their battlefield. So this is technically the first time that they've really brought back the Eternals characters in a big way, if you can call it that. They also imply that Icarus eventually is defeated, like Scarlet Witch eventually is supreme, especially once she gets the Infinity Stone energy, so RIP Icarus and any of the other Eternals that survive for a little while. There is a funny moment where Friday actually says that literally, like, no, he's actually a robot, you can't turn robots into zombies. And even though there is a moment at the very end of the series where Riri Williams tries to tell Kamala Khan to wake up from the illusion that she's trapped in, no, everybody's been turned into zombies, boom, downer ending, slam to credits. During episode 1 here, it's pretty clear that she sacrifices herself to help them get away, so Riri Williams is dead and she shouldn't be able to speak to Kamala Khan in the final episode, so it's not totally clear exactly how that's happening. Maybe she's speaking to her from the afterlife. There are a number of times in the episode where Miss Marvel has visions of things that will eventually come to pass, like Infinity Hulk. She has visions of Scarlet Witch a couple different times. It's not totally clear why that's happening. I think they're trying to tie it to some of the things that were happening during the Miss Marvel series, but the way they use her abilities are a little bit different during this series. Pretty much everybody with her dies to save her life and allow her to get away, and she's saved ultimately by Blade Moon Knight, who's become the new avatar of Khonshu, like I said, calling him Blade Knight during the series. There are a bunch of cool ideas, like I said here, but they intended for this to be released after the live-action Blade movie, so a lot of the big reveals here, like him becoming the new Moon Knight, would have hit way harder had you have seen a lot of Mahershala Ali's Blade in live action already, which obviously we have not because of all the delays. When he mentions the Night Traveler, that's actually a reference to something that Khonshu talks about during the Moon Knight series. Khonshu was the Egyptian god of the moon whose responsibilities include lighting the sky at night to keep night travelers safe. And because of the way Khonshu's powers work, he knew that Miss Marvel would need help here, sending Blade Knight to help her out. They make it to Ohio, where Melina from the Black Widow movie is controlling the zombies the way she controlled the pigs, using the Black Widow programming she developed in that movie. Red Guardian, Yelena are with her, and the surviving Black Widows that they rescued from the Red Room. They set up the whole plot device where they actually need to leave Earth's orbit to get beyond the Wakandan shield that's now scattered across the atmosphere because of an event that they say happened in Wakanda. I think that's meant to be the initial zombie outbreak when it swept through Wakanda. Basically, the Wakandan shield now covers the Earth in a protective bubble, preventing any transmissions from getting off-world. Also because it sounds like the Nova Corps is trying to reinforce that because they've quarantined the planet and they don't want transmissions or anybody else physically leaving the planet.
Your world has been declared condemned. Any attempt to flee the planet will be met with incineration.
All the Avengers have already been turned, so that's why Captain America is here, but there's only half of him. Like, that's the part of the joke, is that he's cut in half. They also have the Abomination because of the Hulk twist later, which is why Hulk isn't already turned, so they can use him for the Infinity Gauntlet twist. There's Ghost, Hawkeye, Red Guardian, just really jazzed up that he gets to finally have a battle with Captain America. A lot of the joke pulls that they go for are references to things from the Marvel Phase 4 movies because that's around the times they started actually making this. So those were the only movies they had to actually pull from. And this whole series is generally meant to be the brand new Marvel Phase 4 characters because all the Marvel Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, like pre-Endgame characters have already been turned. They wind up treating this battle sort of like the Long Night from Game of Thrones. It seems like what his inspiration was. Only this time the Starks wind up using regular zombies to defend against the White Walkers. I guess that would make Scarlet Witch the Night King or the Night Queen in this scenario. There was a Night Queen in the lore of Game of Thrones, but that's like a completely separate idea. There are a couple cool pulls here though, like Abomination does a fastball special with Captain America, who's lost the bottom half of his body, so he just crawls through all of the vents, but he's a zombie, so like it doesn't really matter. Red Guardian able to destroy him by squishing him literally, which is one of the few ways that you can actually permakill zombies. Also, if it wasn't clear, regular zombies in the Marvel Zombies universe move slow and aren't that intelligent. The ones that have been empowered by Scarlet Witch as the Scions, like the superpowered zombies, are the ones that can actually speak and move quickly and can use all their former powers. You also notice that Melina's programming does not work on the ones that have been empowered by Scarlet Witch, the Scions, but it does work on the low-level zombies. This is why she isn't able to control Okoye. There are a couple cool moments with Blade and Moon Knight across the episodes too in the way they use his powers, like how his vampire-based powers mix with the powers that he's given by Khonshu. So for instance, he says he doesn't need to drink blood anymore because of Khonshu's power, but all of his already enhanced senses are enhanced even more, and he has a sixth sense, like he can sense ghosts before she phases into certain areas. Using this to defeat her using some handy sword work. There are also a couple cool moments in the episode where you can actually see Khonshu in the reflection in his actual sword. You also notice now, because of Khonshu's power, he has a Moon Knight-themed motorcycle. Because this is animation and they tried to sell a lot of toys for What If, also probably did this so they could sell a toy based on this. Blade then tries to continue taking her to New Asgard by way of the raft first, like there are a couple stops along the way to pick up people. All because they need a spaceship, which they have at New Asgard. Episode 2 starts with a flashback to the initial zombie outbreak to show what happened to Shang-Chi and Katie in San Francisco, because that is where the original outbreak happened, because it all started with Janet Van Dyne and Hank Pym in the Quantum Realm coming out in the original Avengers were turned on the Golden Gate Bridge. Love the chaos here during the initial outbreak too. The giant ants, the seagull, the zombie, the regular human that fight giant size, all because of the Pym particles. They wind up getting saved by Jimmy Woo, who's still a little bit earlier in the timeline, so he hasn't gotten really good at close-up magic, but there are some close-up magic jokes later in the episodes. You remember that this is meant to take place before the events of the Shang-Chi movie, before the events of WandaVision, so a lot of stuff has not happened yet. This is also why Katie doesn't know anything about Shang-Chi's family, the 10 Rings of Power, or any of that. She all learns here with a big info dump when he comes to save Shang-Chi. One of the other big twists being the Death Dealer is now his friend working with him as one of the survivors, instead of being his bitter enemy like he was during the Shang-Chi movie. He winds up getting bitten on the arm, causing his father to sacrifice the 10 Rings of Power like he did during the movie to stop the spread around his body, also dying in the act. Then they jump back to present day 5 years later, showing that his arm has turned a little more. They're singing Journey, driving across the country Mad Max style, with a bunch of people they've also saved. In some of these other characters, they never actually identify in the credits, or they give them single first names, so they're just meant to be generic characters not from the comics. There are a lot of questions about this when the initial trailer dropped, who are these meant to be? Nope, not meant to be anybody, just random people.
I don't even know who you are.
Jimmy Woo correctly states Steve Perry was Journey's best lead singer. This whole bit with the Skrulls trying to steal their cows is a huge Marvel Comics deep cut Easter egg, really big deep cut, for Fantastic Four Comics number 2 in 1961 with the Skrull cows. They were featured in a bunch of different adventures over many years, but one of the biggest references that people talk about when they talk about Skrull cows is that at a certain point, they were captured and then forced to turn back into cow form, but they're still Skrulls, then were made to go to the slaughterhouse in cow form and got slaughtered and eaten by people. So it's meant to be a big callback to the idea of a zombie series where people eat other people. Also, I think the idea and context here is they want to joke at the idea that these Skrulls aren't trying to steal their cows for food, they're trying to rescue their people who are just stuck in cow form. And it's meant to be a bit of foreshadowing for the way things go down later in the episode with Baron Zemo sacrificing these people to Namor and those zombies. Whole lot of people eating other types of people or sacrificing other people to get eaten. You also notice that Shang-Chi started sharing the 10 rings with Katie. They arrive at the base of the coast, bringing the required tribute, which is what the cows are for. They find Red Guardian, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel's team, everybody from episode 1 who survived, and reveal that John Walker, U.S. agent, is now working under Baron Zemo and complicit in his big scheme to basically sacrifice people to keep themselves safe. And he's turned the raft into a floating city, which is kind of safe from Namor as long as they regularly sacrifice people. Miss Marvel then has another premonition of Infinity Hulk and another Scarlet Witch, basically the events of episode 4. Blade claims that it's because Wanda is after her specifically. There's a connection between the two of them. But like I said, they never fully explain exactly what it is that Scarlet Witch needs from Miss Marvel outside of just having her bangles power. I think that was meant to be the connection at the very end, she needed the bangles power in order to complete what she wanted to do with the world. There are a lot of issues that I actually have with that twist at the end just because of the way her hex powers are supposed to work. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with the way they use people's powers. Baron Zemo then reveals his secret, going full villain, sacrifices people to Namor or tries to, and they basically wind up destroying the raft in the process, with him barely escaping with his life and Yelena sacrificing herself. I think when John Walker gets sliced in half by Namor, it's also meant to be a Captain America reference because Steve Rogers had also been chopped in half. Miss Marvel then able to use her powers to pop his head. Baron Zemo then pilots the life raft the rest of the way to New Asgard in Tonsberg, Norway. So this episode 3 begins with narration from Spider-Man in a flashback to the end of the Marvel Zombies What If episode when they're showing up to Wakanda just as zombie Thanos has shown up with the Infinity Gauntlet to take the Mind Stone. There are a couple changes to the way they said they actually made this particular episode because Chadwick Boseman was supposed to be in the episode and have a bunch of voiceover dialogue, but they didn't start actually animating it until after he had passed away. So they basically gave Spider-Man all this voiceover to cover him instead of speaking. That's also why Spider-Man says that he heard him whisper Wakanda forever before he finally sacrificed himself to dump Thanos inside the Wakandan vibranium core and basically melt him and destroy the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones. There are a lot of Avengers Infinity War references, like Thor showing up with Rocket and Groot, but Thanos, or zombie Thanos, learns how to use the Infinity Stones the same way he learned how to use them together throughout the course of Avengers Infinity War. Winds up wiping pretty much everyone else, defeating Thor, putting him into depression, which is meant to be a reference to depressed Thor, like the fat Thor from Avengers Endgame.
Please, like, he can help us.
Can't you see he's broken? Whatever fight he had died long ago.
Also the reason why he needs the eye patch, making him look more like Odin with the one eye. Although he comes into Avengers Infinity War still having one eye as well too. Originally he lost the eye to Hela, that's the idea. When you see him during the events of Thor Love and Thunder, the reason why it doesn't look like a prosthetic eye is just because the prosthesis is way better than the one that he had before. There's another joke about how Thor should have gone for the head because he throws Stormbreaker at Thanos, also does not stop him, barely phases him. Spider-Man then winds up using it because he doesn't need to be worthy. Like, you don't need to be worthy to use Stormbreaker. You just need to be powerful enough so that it doesn't melt your brain. But I do think that Spider-Man, of all the people who could wield Thor's hammer logically in the MCU, Spider-Man would be just as worthy as, say, someone like Captain America. But one of the problems with Thor's hammer is that a person who wields it has to believe themselves to be worthy in order for it to work. Otherwise, the hammer will recognize them as being not worthy. So you both have to be actually worthy and believe yourself to be worthy. This is why during Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man can't actually wield Mjolnir. He can only attach to it with his webbing. When Black Panther sacrifices himself to destroy Thanos and the Infinity Stones in the molten vibranium, it releases the Infinity Stones energy. Like, he doesn't destroy the Infinity Stones because that's impossible. He just vaporizes them, unleashing all of their energy, which starts sweeping in a giant storm across the world, threatening to destroy it again. They get saved by Rintra from Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and the other sorcerers at Still Camartage. You probably recognize a lot of these characters from Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Like I said, they're relying very heavily on a lot of the Marvel Phase 4 characters they introduced in those movies a couple years ago. All while Miss Marvel's group makes it the rest of the way to Tonsberg, New Asgard, which they built into the mountains now along the cliffs to give them extra protection. There's a lot of dwarven energy here, like the Mines of Moria from Lord of the Rings movies. Khonshu yells at Valkyrie because she won't let them in initially, and she recognizes him because she's been around for over 1,500 years or so. Like, she's about the same age as Thor. There are a lot of meta jokes about the gods themselves just in general. Like, Khonshu is an actual deity, but Valkyrie is not. She just has a lot of power. Thor, though, is an actual deity. Odin is an actual deity. There's an explanation for why some of the Asgardians are gods and some are not in the comics. And then there's the MCU version of the explainer, which is a little bit simpler. Generally, Odin started out being a normal, very powerful alien person and then eventually turned into a god, like he ascended to godhood and then passed that god energy to his children, like Thor, for instance. Another really good example in the MCU is Loki. Like, Loki always played a god. He had god-like power, but he was really just a powerful person that then ascended to actual godhood during the events of the Loki series. So that's why we call him God Loki, and the other regular version of Loki just regular Loki. They revealed that they've been holed up for the past 5 years, and she's been trading with Scarlet Witch, which is just all part of her ruse to actually turn the Asgardians into zombies so she can use them to take the power from the Infinity Hulk. There are a couple name drops here too, where she calls her the Queen of Sokovia, because she is from Sokovia, and Baron Zemo also from there, which is why he perks up like, Sokovia? Why you talk about Sokovia? That was basically the whole reason why he went after the Avengers after Avengers Age of Ultron. Part of the way they're playing this too is that Scarlet Witch, even though she's in zombie form, is using her hex space powers to create an illusion so that she looks like she normally does, and Valkyrie couldn't see through it, except for Moon Knight Blade. Blade can actually detect that it really is zombie Scarlet Witch, and he can see through the illusion of the food, which is why he stops Miss Marvel from trying to eat it. Red Guardian, though, does wind up eating a whole lot of fingers, as he says, causing him to turn, but the Super Soldier Serum, I think, slows down the spread of the zombie virus inside his body, which is why it takes him longer to actually turn.
I ate a lot of fingers.
You also probably noticed that it's Elizabeth Olsen voicing her character again when she's in Wanda form. It's meant to foreshadow her trapping Miss Marvel and everyone else inside her Hex illusion at the end of the episodes too. If it wasn't clear, this is not meant to be the MCU version of Scarlet Witch. This is meant to take place in a completely separate universe. So it is Elizabeth Olsen coming back as Scarlet Witch, but not in the way that people are expecting during like Avengers Doomsday. There's also supposed to be multiple versions of Scarlet Witch that show up during Doomsday as well too, because they're supposedly doing a version of her living with Magneto and the rest of her family like Quicksilver and Polaris on Genosha on the X-Men world that we're supposed to see during that movie. But actual MCU Scarlet Witch is also supposed to come back at some point separately as well. They use her big reveal here to set up the whole twist with the Infinity Stone energies. She basically needs the power of the Infinity Gauntlet. Like I said, there's some inconsistencies with that because of the way her Hex powers are supposed to work. Technically, she shouldn't actually need the Infinity Gauntlet because her powers have latent Infinity Stone types of energies baked into them, basically the same type of energy that was present when the Big Bang happened. They kind of got into this during the WandaVision series, where the idea is that the Hex, if it were left unchecked, would have continued to encompass the entire world, where she would have had total godhood and been able to manipulate things on a very fine scale, just basically do anything she ever wanted to do. This is why I thought the whole twist with the Hulk Infinity Stone powers were a little redundant. Like, they didn't actually need that. Like, she should have been able to do this without the Infinity Stones. When you see them running down the stone-carved steps to get to the spaceship, it's also meant to be a reference to Lord of the Rings Fellowship when they're running from the Balrog. They take the Grandmaster's ship that they stole at the end of Thor Ragnarok, even though technically the Asgardians all have ships that are capable of spaceflight, which you see them using during Thor Love and Thunder. I think the idea is that they just wanted to show the Grandmaster's ship again, like, hey, remember Thor Ragnarok? Thor then wakes up out of his funk, sacrificing himself to allow them to escape, but also meaning that Scarlet Witch now has zombie Thor and his powers. When he names Miss Marvel an Avenger before he sacrifices himself, is also meant to be similar to Iron Man making Spider-Man an Avenger in the middle of Infinity War, because this is around the time Infinity War would be happening in the MCU. Then they reveal the big twist with the Nova Corps. They were here the whole time. That's why the signal didn't take long to reach them. They quarantined the planet long ago and never bothered to actually help. Episode 4 is basically meant to be their last stand against Scarlet Witch and her zombie army. They start the episode in the middle of their escape from the Nova Corps, Miss Marvel protecting them in an airtight bubble with her powers acting as a heat shield as they fall back to Earth. There are a couple funny moments during this too, just because this is animation, like you see Blade just resting there unbothered in midair because he knows they're about to be rescued by the sorcerers from Kamartaj. Miss Marvel, of course, as you would expect, nerds out on Spider-Man and Scott Lang's head like it's the coolest thing she's ever seen. And Scarlet Witch marches her army of the undead towards the Infinity Hulk to take his power. All the sorcerers then explain what happened and how they actually bound all the remaining power of the Infinity Stones to Hulk because it's mostly gamma energy, and it's meant to be a reference to Avengers Endgame where Hulk basically tells you that, like, well, I should wield the Infinity Gauntlet because it's mostly gamma energy. It's as if I was born for this moment. There's also a moment where they refer to him as an anchor being, which also feels like a Deadpool and Wolverine reference to the concept of anchor beings in that Infinity Hulk is so powerful now. Basically, his death means the end of this universe, essentially.
He's a cipher. He's now an anchor.
There are a couple plot holes with this too, like you start to notice. If you watched any of the Avengers movies, like the whole twist in Avengers Endgame is that Hulk snaps the Infinity Gauntlet, uses the Infinity Gauntlet energy to bring everybody back, fix everything that went wrong. If we have Hulk here with all the power of the Infinity Gauntlet just sitting there, why doesn't he use all that Infinity Stone energy to just fix the zombie outbreak and make everybody whole again? Fix everything that's gone wrong the last 5 years. There's a little more plot going on in the background with Miss Marvel worrying that Scarlet Witch wants her to go to Paris for some reason. Like I said, still kind of inconsistent on why she's so important to Scarlet Witch. There are a couple cool moments here during this Infinity Hulk battle scene between him and Scarlet Witch's forces. He basically wipes the floor with almost everybody here. All of her scions, the extra powerful Avengers who've been turned, and other superpowered people. We see a Hulk versus Abomination rematch. Does not last long because he is so powerful. You also notice that the Asgardian weapons, the Uru metal, is able to pierce Hulk's skin, but underneath is just pure energy, which heals pretty quickly because of the way Hulk's powers work, and also because he's been empowered, like, crazy OP because of the Infinity Stone energy. Hulk has basically evolved into a godlike being at this point. He's literally turned into an Infinity Gauntlet. When they portal in to save Hulk from Scarlet Witch, that's meant to be a callback to Thor showing up in Wakanda with Rocket and Groot. During their last stand, her phrase Bismillah is a Muslim word meant to be in the name of Allah. And technically, a lot of people think about this because we got a lot of Thor mythology happening here. Based on Thor Love and Thunder, Allah should exist as a physical, real god living in Omnipotent City with the other gods. Like there's the Carpenter God, which is basically meant to be Jesus. There are a couple cool ideas they try to pay off, a couple cool uses of people's powers, like Miss Marvel slicing a whole bunch of heads off with her abilities. You can see Khonshu in the reflection of Blade's sword. The sorcerers try to destroy a bunch of them with enchants. The creative use of portals to redirect Asgardian weapons. There's a lot of stuff you'd hope that they'd try doing in live action at some point. There's a couple crazy twists, like Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne have been riding inside Hawkeye's mouth this whole time. Blade tries to squish him with his boot, which I think is meant to be a callback to Loki's joke about the ant in the boots from the first Avengers movie. There's a pretty quick zombie Thor versus Infinity Hulk match, which is meant to be a callback to their fight in Thor Ragnarok in the Gladiator arena. He winds up killing Thor, though, perma-killing him by squishing his head. When he's still alive too, there's a couple cool death scenes too, like Blade, for instance, goes out with him zapping him with so much lightning that you actually see the impact frames, and you see him wasted down to his skeleton where you can actually see his vampire teeth. Basically, the whole end of the fight here is just all impact frames because there's meant to be so much energy being given off here. Scarlet Witch convinces Miss Marvel to surrender to her and uses her power, taking Hulk's Infinity Stone energy to achieve total victory, covering the Earth in what seems like a giant hex, and then making it seem like this giant illusion where everything is perfect the way that she wants it to be, but everybody's still in zombie form. She winds up waking up in her Jersey City bedroom in her family's house. She's got a Black Widow movie poster, which is based on a real-life poster Marvel released for that movie. She's got a poster for Iron Man's Mark III armor in the first Iron Man movie. When she goes to get Boba with Riri and Kate Bishop, notice she has the Avengers logo spray-painted on her bag. Also, there's a lot of purple going on here, and the Boba itself is purple. She then gets a vision of Riri Williams from episode 1, somehow telling her to wake up. This is an illusion. I think the idea is that she's talking to her from beyond the grave, because she's supposed to have died during the events of episode 1, so she shouldn't be able to actually speak to her here. And she gets a final vision jump scare from Scarlet Witch as they slam to credits, and boom, that's it.
That show was so brilliant, and
Generally a solid idea that they don't fully, I think, pay off. Like, they don't fully explore things the way they could. And there are a lot of characters that they should have been able to use that they did not use during the series. Like, it could have been way, way cooler. My assumption is they have been able to release it as a theatrical movie. They would have actually done something way, way crazier with way bigger characters. Like, they wouldn't have relied so heavily on the lesser Marvel Phase 4 characters. Just in terms of overall animation that Marvel has done so far, I didn't think it was quite as good as, say, like X-Men 97, and obviously, if you're talking about movies, not nearly as good as the Spider-Verse movies, which are like top-tier animation in terms of Marvel stuff right now. And even though it is cool to see Marvel doing more TVMA, especially adult animation, personally, I think that the Demon Slayer movie, which is out right now in theaters, goes way, way harder than this. So if you really want to see a hardcore, really cool movie, just go see Demon Slayer. It's actually a really, really solid series. Now the real big question is Marvel going to try and cameo any of the animated stuff that they've done between Marvel Zombies or even the Spider-Verse stuff with the live-action Avengers Secret Wars movie, just because that will be the place to try really crazy animated live-action crossover. They literally started to do that during Across the Spider-Verse. Just imagine that, but in a giant Avengers movie. Marvel's next real big TV series they're going to be releasing later this year will be the Wonder Man live-action series. We'll probably start getting trailers for that soon, so I'll just do separate videos for that when they do release some footage. But it's meant to be a completely separate thing inside the actual MCU. We will also probably get some more Spider-Man Brand New Day teasers before the end of the year as well, because it's like the next real big live-action MCU movie that they're releasing next year before Avengers Doomsday. Only 2 movies releasing next year, Spider-Man and Doomsday. There is a lot of stuff that is releasing this week. I'm doing videos for everything, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss it, and just check my channel for new uploads every day, and you should spot the stuff that I'm posting. I literally just did an Avengers Doomsday first look at all the comic book accurate looking X-Men in their costumes. Click here to see that it looks amazing, and click here for all my other episode videos from this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.